Hey, welcome in. If you're already watching with us live, we are just about to start the show, covering everything here from the Combine on day 2. Going to give it just a second to let folks fill in here. Hey, if you are watching, do me a quick favor. Make sure to share this wherever you're watching on Twitter, not Instagram, but YouTube, Facebook, Twitter are the 3 places that you might be watching this. If you can share that wherever you're at, super helpful. Help us get folks in here. So retweet, repost, send to a friend, a buddy that you know that is interested in the NFL, Combine, or the Titans. Very much appreciated if you do that. I'm going to give it just one moment to make sure everything is online here. And hey, by the way, if you are here with us watching, if you could confirm,
Camera's not coming through. There we go. I think that, yeah.
Okay. If somebody could confirm to us in the chat that they can hear us and see us, that would be much appreciated. The YouTube chat is where you can send messages. So if somebody could go to the live stream on Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, go to the chat function, leave us a message letting us know that you can see and hear us. We're broadcasting to a number of different locations. And can you even hear anything? The YouTube chat sounds like I can be heard but not seen.
See if that helps.
Maybe. Not sure why we are having trouble with the video being broadcast here or with the chat. Message there. No video. Audio is good. We're going to troubleshoot this real quick and then we'll get rolling. Let's see. Now we have video. Do we have audio? That's the question. Let's see. Now we have video. Okay, perfect. Sounds like if my feed on my phone is any indication, we finally have video and audio. If somebody, again,
I don't think it's the best audio, but we're working with what we got here.
I think it's fine. Yeah. It's fine quality. Give it a second for everything to boot up. Okay, perfect, Brent. Thank you. Video feed seems to be working. Audio as well. Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Great. So we got this settled. Let me share this real quick on social media. If you watching wouldn't mind doing that as well, for real, consider it a personal favor to me. If you wouldn't mind just sharing that real quick. And then we are going to start the show. A lot of awesome stuff to talk about today. A ton of information that we've gathered that we want to share with you guys. So 30 seconds and then we will get underway.
Today's just been we'll get into it on the show, but it's been a good day. We've had our challenges.
It's going to happen.
All righty.
All right, we all set? Perfect.
I think so.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live from Indianapolis. We are here at the NFL Combine. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We are also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I am joined, as always, and once again in person, by producer JT. JT, how are you?
I'm good. First day of prospect interviews with a couple of GM and coach interviews that they need to finish up, but we're done with coaches and GMs, and today was more focused on the players, including D-line and edge. Like the beginning of our show here, we aren't without our technical difficulties these first couple days, but we're working it out. Hopefully, Fingers crossed. We're doing our best.
We are. So today was a good day. Again, first time we got to speak with any of the prospects. We had defensive line and edge players today. All of those guys spoke at one time or another, except for one, and he's one you're going to have heard of. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. I've got a topic here at the top that we'll get into in a moment. I think that Titans fans are a little bit more confident in one big thing this offseason that they maybe shouldn't be at this point in the year. We'll talk about that. We also have a handful of videos from the two new head coaches in the AFC South, D'Amico Ryans with the Texans and Shane Steichen with the Colts. Both spoke today. We got to be there and listen to that, have some thoughts on what they had to say at the podium. We're going to have some Titans news, go around the NFL, an off-season version of the Titans news segment. So we got a lot of NFL and Titans news alike to discuss. And then we've got a fun teaser video for some content we're shooting tomorrow that we'll show you at the end of the show before we preview day 3, tomorrow's live stream, where we get even more content to be made and even more things to see and do. That's the way that they've structured things here at the Combine. It ramps up each and every day. And as we get closer and closer to the weekend, where really the main event takes place with player evaluations on the field, the actual physical elements of the Underwear Olympics get underway, and we get to talk to some key players at some more key positions like quarterbacks and receivers and tackles, the high-value draft picks. So we'll get into all of that. Again, if you are watching with us live, we appreciate that a ton. If you're listening in the future, and it's Thursday morning is when you're going to catch this episode recorded, either Wednesday night or Thursday morning. If you're listening via podcast or the video version of the show on YouTube, we appreciate that as well. But just so you know, JT and I are here in Indianapolis all week for the Combine. So we've got live coverage every single day in the afternoon or the evening. We're going through all of the tidbits that we gathered from the day. And it's an opportunity for us to chat with you guys. Any ideas that you have for us in terms of what you're wanting to see the following day when we preview the guys we're going to talk to. We'd love to hear thoughts on that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on the guys we got to talk to today. And we have some videos to show you on that front as well. But all in all, JT, to let people behind the curtain a little bit, it's your first Combine. It's my first Combine. And we're learning as we go. It's a learning experience. It's super awesome. I will say that every person that I've talked to pretty much that is veteran enough in the sports media game to have been to more than a handful of combines in their day, they have all told me yesterday and today that eventually you learn to hate this event. And maybe that's just the crotchety old sports writers talking. I don't know. I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it. I guess if you're a social person, it's a more fun event. So if you're more the introverted writer type, maybe not for you. And if you're not a draft nerd, it's probably not for you for the full week.
Probably. I mean, it's so many prospects every day. And especially for that first first hour to 3 hours here. I mean, you're just go. Every 20 minutes, there's 8 to 11 new prospects up on the board or on the podium there.
Right.
And it is a constant cycle of just change for interviews. So I get why a bunch of people might not want to stick around for 4 whole days of that. But then also, I mean, we get kind of some of the variety tomorrow as well. When the drills and the weigh-ins and physicals and all that start happening.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So today is the last day that we don't have those drills and physical activities going on, things that we'll be able to go over to Lucas Oil Stadium and watch Watch the stuff that when you think about the combine, you're typically associating with the combine. So that begins tomorrow. Not sure in terms of schedule for tomorrow's live show. We'll keep you updated. Make sure that you're following us at Easton Freeze, at JT_Runke, at the Hot Read Pod, and at Broadway _TN for all the updates on the show for tomorrow and for the rest of the week. But let's dive into today's topic. And this first one it's not combine related. It's not exactly combine related, but it's not combine unrelated. Let's call it combine adjacent. And this is my take real quick at the top here for the segment that we so lovingly call on the Hot Read podcast, the warm-up. Today's warm-up take is this. What happens when offensive tackle at number 11 overall in this year's draft is an offensive tackle anymore? This is the question that I've been turning over in my head for the last 12 to 18 hours. And it's something that really came to a head with me this morning in a conversation that I had at about 9 o'clock, sitting down in between sessions with players. I was speaking to Jim Wyatt, Titans beat writer. If you follow the Titans at all or the NFL, you probably know Jim. Great guy. And I was sitting with him. We were talking about the prospects, talking a little ball. I was trying to get the veteran, the pros pro, to drop a little knowledge on me. I'm trying to learn the ropes of the combine here, and I feel equipped to talk about these prospects, but I've never talked to them in this format. So we're just trying to figure out. You've been here before. You've done this. How do you approach this? And so that was the gist of the conversation. But we got talking about the Titans draft in particular, how he and I, as Titans journalists, Titans writers, broadcasters, how we approach this strange situation where you've got all these guys, you have north of 300 people to talk to, and it's a very different sports press conference setup than what you're typically used to in a given season. It's one that invites a lot of the same questions over and over and over, some dumb questions that aren't lazy as much as they are, I think, people just grasping at straws, trying to think of something to ask. And it is, to their credit and to all of our credit, it is a more difficult task coming up with questions for these guys, because unless you know them all like the back of your hand, if you're Daniel Jeremiah and this early in the offseason cycle, you already are familiar with the entire draft class, then cool, you can go talk to these guys. Or if you're a big college football nut and you know them really well, then great. But if you are a month or so into studying this class, it's impossible to know much about guys that aren't in the top 50 or so. You just know anecdotal stuff, and you generally know their draft stock and maybe some tape, but you don't know a ton about them, their experience. So a lot of the questions about what was it like at your school, with your team, all of that is more difficult to come up with off the top of your head and be prepared for, because these things come hot and heavy. It is 20 minutes with 8 or 9 guys at once. And then after those 20 minutes, it's immediately on to another batch of 8 or 9, and then another batch of 8 or 9, every 20 minutes for the entire morning.
Yeah. And like some of those guys, like definitely it's hard because in each batch you have like 1 or 2 of the top 50 sprinkled in there, so that's where like the meat of the media is going to be. So it just kind of leaves
bulk of the people.
It kind of leaves you to like go around to these other guys and see if there's like any kind of questions you can ask. And there is some value in that, but like not to, I guess what I'm trying to say is like some guys would like go around and ask like, oh, you're this prospect, but you played against this better prospect. How was that? And I'm like, that's doing a disservice to them, Like
no, it is.
I would rather not ask that question at all. But it's interesting because it's a totally different ball game than like a press conference with a head coach or something, or like a GM or something, because it's just like, there really isn't a bad question because these guys have to be there, and like they're basically all this, like they all come from a different school, but like they all play the same game, So yeah,
it is a weird situation. But let me veer us back on track here, because I was trying to get to the bottom of this take, and then I took us off the road. So I got on the exit ramp. I'm getting right back on the on ramp, because here's the take. in talking to Jim Wyatt, we were discussing just how much is uncertain this time of year. That's what I was getting at. And because of that uncertainty, when you are at the combine, as media members trying to cover this as best we can, you're having to do some guesswork in terms of who would be most valuable or most relevant to talk to for whatever it is you're covering, for your media market, for your demographic. That's something that you can make educated guesses on, right? If you know your team, if you're covering the Chiefs and you have Patrick Mahomes, you're not going to worry about the quarterbacks nearly as much. If you are the Titans and you have if you have the Titans and you have plenty of, there's not a kind of a bad team to choose. They don't have a position where they're totally locked down. Maybe safety a little bit, or punter. We'll say punter. If you're the Titans and you're covering the Titans, the punters are a group that you're not going to pay as much attention to. It is some guesswork going on though, because we just don't know what these teams value. First of all, each team values different positions, different players slightly differently. And each team is going to build their draft in a way that we don't really know the order of it until they get to draft night. We can assume, because the Titans, for example, just to take one team, but it applies to all of them. If they are in a situation like they currently are and they need a tackle desperately, the assumption is, and this is an assumption that everyone is making, it's an assumption that we've been making, it's something that is a fair thing to guess. This is the educated guess. Well, the Titans, they're going to go with Paris Johnson Jr. or Peter Skoronski or DeJuan Jones or one of these top 5 tackles at the beginning of the draft at 11, because that's the position they need the most, and tackle is a premium position in the draft. That's a fair assumption to make. However, in talking to Jim, we kind of both came to the realization that there's a decent chance this Titans team, I don't think it's a majority chance, but it's far less than zero. If they go out and they make a splash move in free agency for a tackle, and they're content with Nicholas Petit-Frere at right tackle, which I tend to lean towards, he had a rough back end of his rookie season, but I think that they're still going to be committed to him at right tackle, both because they have bigger fish to fry on the offensive line front, and also I think that they see a lot in him and they like him, so they're going to keep giving him a try. If they go make one splash tackle move, they're not going with tackle at 11. They're going to go somewhere else. If they sign just some random tackle off the streets, if Kendall Lamb comes in here like he did last year and is that caliber of lineman, a replacement level guy, you send a 5th round pick, heaven forbid, to Carolina for a guy to play left tackle. I can't even think of a fake name that could possibly fit in this very fake scenario. That is the kind of guy that you are still going to go and get a top flight tackle, because they're not being expected to start. But it was reported yesterday, or at least tweeted about yesterday, 1:30 p.m. by our best friend in the world on this show, Jared Stillman, over at 102.5 The Game. He said that he is hearing there's interest from free agent tackle Mike McGlinchey in joining the Titans. This is the tackle who currently is on the roster. Well, actually, I don't know if he's a free agent. I'm assuming he is, since he's talking about free agency here. But this is a guy that was on the 49ers for a couple of seasons and now is in free agency. I'm assuming he is interested in joining the Titans, according to Stillman's sources. McGlinchey knows Rand Carthon, of course, the Titans' new GM from San Francisco, and could be an option at either tackle spot. He played left tackle in college at Notre Dame before playing right tackle in San Francisco. Stillman added he figures to have a robust market. So this is just one example of, I'm guessing, a number of examples we'll have in the coming weeks and maybe months, where as free agency starts to kick up, as the, granted, very limited pool of tackle free agents or trades, mind you, trades are still a thing, the Titans could decide, hey, outside of quarterback, we think left tackle is the most important position on the offensive side of the ball, maybe even on the entire team. We're willing to pony up and make a big splash trade for a left tackle. It's not off the table by any means. They could end up packaging that first overall pick to send to somebody and go full Eagles last season. Send away your first round pick. Why draft a wide receiver in the first round at 18 or 16 when you can trade to the Titans to get AJ Brown instead? The Titans might take the same tack and decide we're going to send off our 11th pick, and instead of drafting a tackle there, we're not in love with all of these guys, the positional value there. Maybe we're in love with another guy at a different position. Maybe they just not off the table. Maybe they love a quarterback, or maybe they fall in love with one of these edge guys. One in particular that you really found fascinating today, thought he did great at the podium, who is I think we talked about this yesterday, didn't we? We mentioned he could be a Titans target there just because his style of ball, it's a Titans style of play from him.
Yeah, and I think the whole point is that I think we need to start tempering expectations for fans on who they think, because I think, number one, I don't know if Paris Johnson Jr. is going to exactly be there. I don't think that he will. I think there's definitely a team in that top 10 who's going to, maybe it might be a little bit of a reach. We'll have to see. We're gonna see this week how he measures up with his measurements and how they perform in the drills. But Paris Johnson most likely will not be there. There's definitely a team, I think, in the top 10 that will probably reach on him, or they just value him in that top 10. And then you have the question of Peter Skronsky. Is he a tackle? Is he going to be a guard? And that's a whole nother can of worms. He sure thinks
so. I sure think he isn't.
Yeah, that's another can of worms that if they get drafted, that's going to be the talking point for the next 6 months.
Yes, but the key to the take here, JT, and not to put words in your mouth, but I think you agree. The key is not that people need to stop expecting the Titans to draft tackle. That's still the assumption.
Yeah.
That if we're playing the odds game, and it's all pieces of the pie here, folks. I'm not saying it's a minority of the probability pie that the Titans go tackle at 11. I'm just saying maybe it's more today like 60, 70% and not the 95% that people are talking about. But the key here, and you tell me if this is putting words in your mouth that you don't agree with, it's not tempering expectations. It's tempering them on March 1st, today. Yeah. It's March 1st.
Because in 14 days.
Free agency hasn't even begun. The league year is not even up. We're not even into the new league year. Free agency has not legally begun. So we can't possibly know with much certainty at all whether or not the Titans are going to want a tackle there, if they're going to be in a position to get a tackle there. We don't know. So I think that as we cover the offseason, the draft, free agency, this assumption that has become very hot and heavy early, and this is the crux of my take, this take that the Titans are going tackle in the draft at 11. So let's cover the team and let's hypothetically build out this roster for the next couple of weeks with that assumption in mind. I don't think that's necessarily fair.
I don't think it is either. And I think if we've learned anything from this week from Rand Carthen and Mike Vrabel is that
no one's safe.
That no one is safe, and that if there is a better player than the next best offensive tackle, I think they're going to go best player available over the offensive tackle and maybe try their hand in free agency. There are three really good corners it's shaping up to look like that could go in the top 12 here, and Joey Porter Jr., Christian Gonzalez, and Devin Witherspoon. They all can't go before 10. So then you kind of ask yourself, would we rather take one of these stud corners here and go and test the free agency market? And then who we're about to talk about pretty soon here coming up, there's another guy who I think they could target just because I think his stock is rising upwards very quickly. And he, like we said yesterday, he fits the mold that the Titans want to base their team around very well.
JT, real quick, do me a favor. Pull up PFF. Look at the PFF grade of the Titans' 2 tackles last season. I have the PFF grade here pulled up for Mike McGlinchey, by the way, who was this first rumored free agent tackle that is reportedly interested in joining the Titans. It's must-lie season. We don't know that to be a fact, but if this report from Jared Stillman and I guess Stillman's source is true, sounds like he might be interested in joining Tennessee. He last season in 2022 had an overall grade of 71.5, just using PFF as one metric. Of course, it's not the be-all, end-all. We don't treat PFF like the Bible on this show, but we do think it's a useful tool. Whereas the Titans' 2 tackles, what were the grades they had?
Well, Dennis Daly probably had the lowest of any tackle.
I'll look him up here.
46.1.
I'll look him up. You had it?
Yeah,
It was
46.1.
46.1.
And then Nicholas Petit-Frere had a 52.3.
Yeah, so Mike McGlinchey, is he the best tackle in the league? No. Is he for sure a left tackle? He played it in college. He didn't play it so far in his NFL career, but it sounds like he'd be demonstrably better than anything the Titans had last year. And I would even wager to say he would for sure be better now than anybody you could draft in this draft class. The ceiling is not as high as some of these guys, but you don't have that boom bust potential, and you don't have that waiting period that you'd have to undergo with linemen. We talk about this on the show all the time. Linemen are among the, if not the slowest position in the entire league to develop. Typically, year one, they stink.
Yeah, and we've talked about the classes that are like star-studded, like super deep classes. That's not this tackles class.
No.
Every guy on here has a flaw in their game, and a lot of them is that they still need time to develop here, and that's a very valid argument in which why don't we just go get a guy who's already proven in the league versus having to now, and that goes with the Titans plan of do we want to just ride with Tannehill and then figure out what we're doing next year, and we're just kind of taking this year to develop and get pieces around maybe drafting a quarterback next year. But if you're still going with Tannehill and you're kind of still think you can win the AFC South, I think getting better with veteran help at the free agency is better than through the draft.
Yes, I agree. So that is the take for today in the warm-up. We'll move on. We talked to, as we mentioned at the top of the show, defensive linemen and edge players today. Got to talk to, I don't know, we have to pick and choose our spots again because it's 9 guys at a time. I think we got a chance to talk to or listen into the conversations with, I don't know, I feel like I got a dozen of them. You got more than I did because I was busy with some other things.
I probably got around 15 to 17 guys.
Yeah, so, and we had targeted ahead of time who we were going to pay attention to. So a lot of the guys we missed were guys that will be depth players that we honestly can't cover in any meaningful, substantive form or fashion this time of year, just because we don't know about them yet. They're going to be borderline draftable players, right? They're going to go late day three. And then the other guys that we intentionally missed for the most part were guys at the very top of the draft, just because, again, the Titans may not be going tackle with 11 for sure, but odds are they probably will be going with a position other than defensive line and edge there. So we chose a couple of those top guys, but mostly I tried to keep the folks we were paying attention to in the consensus mock draft board, which is by the way, I haven't shouted this out in a while on the show. If you're not familiar with the consensus draft board, it is, I think mockdraftable.com puts it together. And it is a number of the top mock drafts in the nation, the Dane Bruglers, the Daniel Jeremiahs, the Bucky Brooks, takes those, puts them together into a consensus board and finds where the consensus is on these guys, ranking the draft class. So we were trying to focus on consensus guys in that 35 to 75, 85 range, those guys that would be second and third round picks. A lot of the day 2 guys, the Titans could absolutely look to reload on the defensive front with one of those day 2 picks. And the first guy was one of, if not the only top 5 to 10 prospect in his position group. It was Luke Van Ness. And we teased this yesterday. I have some thoughts on Luke, but I'll give you the floor to give your thoughts first, because you were the one that was paying attention to his conference while I was listening elsewhere. And you came over to me immediately and said, that was the most impressive one that I've been to today. What was it about speaking to Luke that you found so impressive?
He commanded the floor, unlike a lot of the prospects today. And I get it. It's hard, but that's how you're going to establish yourself away from other prospects. He just stood out to me as a variable guy. But all the guys from Iowa today, not just Lucas Van Ness, shout out Jack Campbell, but Lucas Van Ness was by far my favorite guy today. He commanded the floor. Every answer that he gave was a true team player. I'm gonna go out there and give you all I have and do whatever's asked of me, kind of thing. He is kind of one of my favorite players to have on defense on your team, because he is fits into whatever culture that you have, and he's gonna totally buy in.
Yeah, I gathered that from the clips that I saw and from what I heard from others that saw it as well. Van Ness, from a prospect standpoint, I think that he is the guy I have circled, at least, where, again, if the Titans were to go with an edge player at 11, he'd be high on their board. He is their kind of player. He's got really, really high motor, known for his power rush. Let's see. Last season, he generated 46 pressures and 9 sacks for Iowa. What's interesting about him is, he's coming out of his sophomore season. He's only played 2 years, young guy. And at 6'5", 269, I believe he's 21 years old, just under 22 years old. But regardless, he's somebody that was behind other players at his position that were juniors and seniors or fifth-year seniors. And the way that this works, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah talking about this a couple of days ago. He didn't start this year. And that's not because he wasn't the best guy at his position. He was, for sure, without a doubt, maybe the best player on that entire Iowa team. In fact, I think he probably was the best player on that Iowa team.
And the best player on an Iowa team that was ranked second in the entire nation in total defense, too.
Exactly. And so he's a stud on the stud side of the ball for a stud team in terms of defense.
And he talked about that. Today, someone asked him, hey, you didn't start this year. You had 2 guys ahead of you. And he just came back with a smile, and he's like, that's seniority over at Iowa.
Well, that's the way that they do it.
That's the way we do it. I was just happy to get out there. And when I get out there, I'm going to give it my all. And I was like, that's the perfect answer to that.
No, that's not to say he didn't get the vast majority of the playing time. He did. Yeah. But the guys out there for the first snaps that he was rotating with, they were seniors that were significantly worse than him and probably won't be getting drafted ever. So that's kind of the way it is, and it's interesting. But he had a fantastic sophomore year. It's really the reason that he's coming out. I think 70.1 PFF grade as a rookie, 80.2 as a sophomore. He again 9 sacks, 15 tackles, almost 500 snaps, a decent sample size, but he's the kind of guy, and I've seen at least one person compare him. Their player comp was Justin Smith. It's a guy that I think you could have some positional flexibility playing him inside or out. He'll mostly be probably a stand-up outside guy, but his height is really the thing that is the double-edged sword. He is a long guy, very tall, very long. So the reach on him from an edge player perspective on the outside is part of the reason that he's so elite. Unless your tackle has, 34.5, 35-inch arms, he's probably not getting to a guy like 6'5" Luke Van Ness. And where he wins really is that he at 6'5" is still able to get low enough to out leverage his opponents. It's amazing. The little bit of tape that I've watched, I've not watched a ton of him, but he is on my short list of guys I'm going to go watch more of. His ability to somehow stay as balanced as he does at 6'5", bend around the edge and get home it's special. It's the kind of thing you look at and you just go, that guy's got it. It's an it thing.
Yeah. And his explosiveness, I've watched a little bit more tape than you, I think, but his explosiveness still being that tall and that big just kind of complements him, and like his bull rush on the outside is just absolutely insane from what he did this year. And he wasn't playing like
I'm seeing right here how dominant he had a dominant bull rush. Yeah.
And it wasn't even like he's playing bad competition. He's in the Big Ten. He was facing a lot of those guys like DeJuan Jones.
Hey, and I'll tell you what, that defense is on the field a lot.
So not a lot of scoring going on in any of those games.
No.
And while the Iowa defense is really, really good, the Iowa offense and a bunch of those other teams, not great.
I've never heard reputable confirmation that it even exists. I don't know if there is an Iowa offense, but yeah, I'd say experience. He got as much as he possibly could on that defense in 2 years.
He also comes with kind of a little plus bonus, which is that he moved from the interior to the edge.
Right. And that's where he projects as an NFL player, is on the edge. That's the reason why, really. But the fact that he had experience, and sounds like the majority of his experience until just recently was as an interior player. Mm-hmm. So he does have that versatility that a team like the Titans, if you're wondering whether or not they would value that kind of versatility, who on the Titans defensive line has been the most invaluable player for them and the most unheralded player for the Titans pass rush for the past 2 seasons at least? Can we think of who?
Throw out names. I don't know. Jeffrey Simmons?
Well, no,
Pierre Tart? Who are we talking about?
No, it's former Colts player.
Former Colts player?
Yeah.
Who?
This is funny because I'm blanking on the name as well.
I have no idea.
I was hoping I could
Bud
just.
Dupree?
I have Bud Dupree stuck in my head. When in reality, we are talking, of course, about what is wrong with me. This is what happens when you do a live show and you freak out over names. Gosh,
I have no idea who you're talking. I don't know.
And now I can't even get a roster to pull up. Holding that thought for really great audio that for live people, we apologize. In the audio version of the podcast, it's going to be cut out. But we are talking about finally a depth chart. Jeez Louise, man. This is brutal. Oh, okay. It's not loading. Awesome.
Should I just like
Can you play elevator music?
Yeah, I don't know.
Found it. Jeez. Are you ready for the grand reveal? This is how broken my brain is today.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's because we talked to 74 different people.
Yeah.
And so many names have been going through my head today.
Yeah.
My name machine is broken. Talking about Danico Autry.
Oh,
obviously it's Danico Autry because we're talking about a guy that can play inside and outside.
We didn't even.
Yeah, we named everyone in the pass rush.
Mostly because I was like, I thought you were talking about someone that was like the Titans brought in so many people on the defense this year. I'm like, are you talking about some guy they just brought off a practice squad or something?
No. So Danico Autry is the perfect example of a guy that is doing exactly what best case you could see a Lucas Van Ness project to be able to do in the NFL. He has expertly and last season deserving of a Pro Bowl and all pro votes, in my opinion, until he got hurt. He was able to flex in and out from game to game and from snap to snap. And that's something that the Titans were happy to utilize him in that role. And it works really effectively, especially in particular when a team like the Titans that loves to use and really has pioneered the increased usage of in the NFL, these simulated pressures. That kind of guy is the ultimate weapon because you can have him line up at a position and then execute a different responsibility.
And that's exactly where the Titans, if there was one bright spot this past year, it's Danico Autry on that team. Even he was undoubtedly probably the star on that defense for most of the year last year.
Exactly.
So bringing in a guy like Lucas Van Ness to pair with him and Jeffrey Simmons would be super scary.
Well, JT, to put a bow on this before we move on to the next prospect, I'll try to not go 0 for 2 here on pitching you a question and answer.
Yeah.
What is the V word we talked about yesterday that perfectly describes Lucas Van Ness?
Versatility.
Bingo. We're back to 500 on the pitching catches there. He is. I mean, listen, we heard these Titans coaches, GMs, offensive coordinator yesterday talk extensively about we've got to get more versatile. We've got to get players that can play more positionless. And Lucas Van Ness is the perfect example of a guy that can do just that. So we'll move on, but not until we hear from Luke Van Ness. This was a clip from him, and he's talking about that transition that he made from the interior to the edge in college. Here's what he had to say.
Initially, what did you learn from making that transition?
Yeah, everything happens a little bit faster outside. You also get a lot better vision, standing out there, getting to, check out what's going on with the backfield, the formations, just getting a better understanding of what's going to happen to me. And I think it was really beneficial just to learn that aspect of the game and communicate with my teammates to help everyone as much as possible. It's different. They are really similar in the same aspects, but I was really able to utilize my toolbox and, excel in different parts of the game, being outside.
The next player that we got to hear from today that we wanted to highlight is B.J. Ojulari out of Clemson, correct? LSU. Gotcha. Different Tiger, but a Tiger nonetheless.
Yeah.
The LSU Tigers player, B.J. Ojulari, is a guy that you spoke to as well, and you were impressed with B.J. What was it about his press conference that you found interesting?
I think he also carried himself really well, and he talked a lot about how he wants to kind of mimic his game after a bunch of guys in the league, which I found super interesting. He said in one of he just named a bunch of guys that I was like,
well, here we have the clip.
Yeah,
So how
we
about we
have
go
the
ahead
clip.
and play it.
We can play
Here
it.
is BJ Ojulari before we dive into him as a prospect. This was who he emulates from watching players in the NFL, correct?
Yeah.
Here's who in the NFL BJ Ojulari tries to play like or thinks his game is most similar to. You might hear, Titans fans, a familiar name.
Clarks, the Bud Dupree's as well. So those are the little pass rushers that I watch to help my game as well.
So Ojulari, among others, Bud Dupree is a guy that he models himself after, and that's part of the reason why we were interested in talking about him today. I don't think we came into the day thinking we'd talk a ton about him, but he is in that range on the consensus board. 38, I could see him going in the beginning of the second round. In reality, I would, if I was placing a bet first or second round, I'd say it's more likely he goes to the end of the first round. But you could totally see him sneak far enough to the Titans' second pick, which would be what, like 42, 43-ish area?
Yeah, I think it's 43.
But there's 31 picks in the first round instead. So it'd be 42,
Yeah,
actually.
42.
Yeah. So that is a guy that you could see right there at 42. And he is a prospect that is another example, I think, of this theme that I think will probably end up being the theme of the offseason, the two themes of versatility and collaboration. He's a versatile player. He's a guy that has played a lot of ball. He's a junior at 6'3", 250. And if you recognize the name, of course, we've talked about this in the past, but in case you weren't aware, BJ Ojulari, his brother Azeez Ojulari, famous famous Giants player, and they play relatively similar styles.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the biggest guy for an edge player as compared to Van Ness at 6'5", 270. His 6'3", 250 gives him a lower center of gravity, maybe more of a little more prototypical body type for an edge player, but he has really refined technique for a prospect coming out, and his skill is pretty off the charts. As I look over my notes here, I mean, he was the production guy at LSU. There was no lack of production from him in his last two seasons where he was getting most of his starts. He ended up racking up more than 100 pressures and tackles, not combined, individually, over 100 pressures, over 100 tackles, and 17 sacks in his last two seasons. Very consistent player in college as well. This is a guy that, and maybe this is room for a little bit of a knock. I don't know how much more room there is for him to develop to hit his ceiling. You see a guy like this in college as a freshman have a 73.5 PFF grade, and then rounds out his college career at 73 and then 75.8. All right there, 73 to 75. Very consistent. He's been a stud for a long time, and his usage increased. So I guess you could say he maintained the same quality of play while increasing quantity. And that matters because in the NFL, they play more games than they play in college. So that's an important one. But he is a guy that the double-edged sword of, he comes in a little bit more prepared than a lot of the prospects. He's a little bit more refined. But how close to that ceiling of refinement is he? How much more refining is there that can be done? That's the question these GMs, scouts, coaches, they're going to have to ask themselves in evaluating him.
Yeah, and he's kind of not the opposite of Lucas Van Ness, but he has more of that technique and shiftiness that you would want in the position, whereas Luke Van Ness is just going to be that bull rusher and just knock people over, and that's like his game. Now, BJ Ojulari is just kind of a little bit different, and so with the consistency and that kind of style of play, that's where he might knock down a few points. And if the Titans don't want to go edge in the first round, they could certainly find themselves looking at him in the second.
Yeah, he could be a second-round pick for them. Another guy that could be a second-round pick for them is a guy who Tennessee fans are going to be very familiar with. And by Tennessee, I mean Tennessee Vols fans. This is the premier edge rusher out of Josh Heupel's most recent edition of the Tennessee Volunteers. It's Byron Young. Got a chance to speak to him this morning. And by the way, very confusing that there are two Byron Youngs at this combine in this class. They went to different schools, but they are spelled exactly the same. And it is frustrating whenever you're looking up anything about either of them. So far, I've looked up Byron Young probably 5 times today, and I was looking up both guys at different times. Every time I looked up one, I would just happen to get results on the other. You can't, if you're looking for one, you're going to be led to the other and confused. So if you hear a lot of talk about Byron Young, maybe double the amount you'd expect this draft cycle, it's because there's 2 of them. This Byron Young is, I'd argue, the better of the Byron Youngs.
I agree with that.
He's a guy that I got to speak with, and I was really impressed with how he handled some of the questions regarding what it is he can bring to a team. That's another one of the generic questions that's kind of thrown out there on a every single press conference basis here at the Combine. But he was asked about what kind of things he can show coaches, and a lot of the responses you get to that kind of question are, I'm just going to show them that I care, that I'm about the team first, and I'm going to give it my all, and I'm 100% in, and I'm hungry. Generic traits-based answers. He gave an answer that was a certified ball knower answer. This was I know that what matters is my technique and my ability technically, and he gave a handful of technical answers. So here's what Tennessee Volunteer pass rusher edge Byron Young had to say about what he can show coaches this week, as well as the second question. I don't think you can hear it in the audio, but the question was asked whether or not he'd met with the Titans yet. Those are the 2 questions. Here's what he had to say.
Just, my footwork, lateral movement, just things like that, my drills. I feel like they're really going to be, keying in on my technique, so I definitely I'm prepared for that. Yes, sir. Informal.
And what was that conversation?
It was great, great vibe. I was just talking with the coaches and, getting to know them, getting to know the playbook a little bit, but it was great.
Which coaches did you meet with?
Sir?
Which Titans coaches did you meet with?
The Titan coach, I can't remember the name. Can't remember the name right now.
So couldn't quite remember the name of the Titans coach that he met with. Can you blame him? He's met with how many coaches this week? Every team, multiple coaches and player personnel guys. But have you done much study on Byron Young yet? Do you have any thoughts on Byron Young?
Not a lot of. I've kind of gone into the Combine, started to go past those top 7 or 8 guys at the positions and start getting into it. But it's a lot of guys to go through in right before the Combine. So I'm sure I'm going to get to him. But he is another guy that I think is probably going around that 2 to 3rd round, 2nd to 3rd round spot there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm looking up on the consensus board here. He actually could sneak into the 3rd day on the consensus board. He is at the 105th spot overall, but the best ranking for him of the mocks that are put into this algorithm is 59th. So you could see him go anywhere from mid day 2 to late day 2 to early day 3. He's the kind of guy that I think is going to be more of a scheme based, less on the versatile side, more which team thinks they can utilize him best in their system. A couple other players to mention from today. And again, we're not scraping the bottom of the barrel by any means, but we don't have nearly as much to talk about with these players as I think we will in coming days, because we are still ramping up. We got not the lesser positions. We got smaller groups today, less players. We got if you see on the list for tomorrow, it's maybe double the guys coming to the podium, because we have the coaches and GMs out of the way. That's going to be all day long. And you get this cornerback class, which is both stacked, deep, and I'll tack on a 3rd one. There's a million of them. Yeah. So but to wrap up today, 2 guys that I noticed, and if you had any, I didn't even run this by you. If you had any other than the 3 we've already talked about that you found interesting, I want to hear your thoughts. Nolan Smith out of Georgia, I believe, and the schools at this point. Yes, Nolan Smith out of Georgia. They're getting mixed in my head, so I got to double check. But Nolan Smith is a guy on the consensus board. He's definitely going in the 1st round. I don't have to look to know that. He's an edge player that I thought he was another vibes guy today at the podium. He had a really, really strong crowd, and the reviews from everyone that I saw online were solid, myself included. I walked away from that one kind of the same way that you walked away from your Lucas Van Ness presser, saying that was impressive, big personality, dominated in front of the microphone, talking with a lot of intentionality and fire, but he wasn't being fake about it. He really came across as the kind of guy, not exactly like Dan Campbell, because nobody's like Dan Campbell, but that kind of that kind of fiery, intentional, realness from him is something that I found really impressive and compelling. And it's the kind of thing that will absolutely win over some coaches when they meet.
Yeah. For me, my player, I kind of mentioned him a little bit, but Jack Campbell today. I loved the Iowa guys today. They came out and just
You were big on the Iowa
knocked
guys.
knocked it out of the park.
Corn-fed fellas.
Yeah, corn-fed fellas who know ball.
Sure.
If anybody knew ball today,
you walked over to me from
it
this
was Jack
conference. You go,
Campbell.
"Hey, Jack Campbell." I go, "From Iowa." You go, "Yeah, dude knows ball."
Dude knows ball. He's probably, if you're going into this draft as a GM or a coach and you're looking for a linebacker who is really good in zone coverage, you're going to take Jack Campbell first off the board. He had a 91.7 PFF grade overall last season. He's insane in box coverage. He just sees the field so well. He allowed only, I think 200, let me check my notes, 236 yards on 418 coverage snaps this season, which gave him a 92.9 coverage grade. Dude is insane. And everybody's asking him questions about how he plays zone. And he's
just let's reiterate that a 92 point something coverage grade. And what position does he play?
Linebacker.
Yeah, he's an edge player.
Yeah,
he's an on ball linebacker.
Yep.
For most of his playing time. So
and
that's ridiculous.
And we would ask him questions like, yeah, if you just like go into the playbook, man, and you see your reads and you're already going through the plays, and offensive coordinators are trying to get shifty now, but I just read my coverages, and I know what their schemes are, and I'm just going to go out there and I know the game. And I was like, yeah, this dude gets it.
The last guy that I'll mention is Will Anderson. This was the biggest press conference of the day. It probably would have been the second biggest, but one got canceled. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Will Anderson out of Alabama, of course, he's the either first, second, or third defender in this entire class, depending on who you ask. He was fantastic at the podium, and just a funny note, this is really all I have to say. He was asked who the toughest player he ever played in his college career was. He said it was Bijan Robinson, running back out of Texas, who's a very polarizing draft prospect this cycle, not because he himself is polarizing. Everyone agrees he's a stud. It's polarizing, I guess, just where exactly you should draft a running back, whether or not the first round should ever be a spot for a running back. But that philosophical conversation notwithstanding, we'll move on here. And we've got a couple other things to dive into before we leave you for the day and head out and get some dinner and do some work in preparation for tomorrow. We did hear from the two new head coaches in the AFC South. D'Amico Ryans was first up today, the new head coach with the Texans. Of course, he came over to Houston from San Francisco, where he went from Houston, might I add, played at Houston. He's a player, formerly now the GM of the team that he called home. And he was asked about Ran Carthon, I believe, by our buddy, Teron Davenport. He and Ran, of course, worked together in San Francisco. And here was the high praise that new Texans head coach D'Amico Ryans had for new Titans GM Ran Carthon.
With Ran Carthon is we have a great relationship. Our families are really close. Ran is a great friend, a great mentor to me. I know Ran will be an awesome GM for the Titans because first and foremost he's a great man. Ran he's very relatable, very personable. Everybody's Ran's best friend. He can connect with anyone, right? And he's always has a big smile on his face. But Ran knows talent. Ran knows how to evaluate talent, and working with him.
That is, once again, Ran Carthon's collaborator reputation preceding him. And it is, without fail, whoever knows Ran Carthon and is asked about Ran Carthon says something along those exact lines about Ran Carthon. D'Amico Ryans went on to talk about the obvious question in the room at the top of the list for the Texans, quarterback. What's going on? Where are we in terms of evaluating this class of quarterbacks? Are they considering free agency? The Texans only have one quarterback currently on their roster, and they need at least two more to throw on there. So that's what he was asked about, and here is what D'Amico Ryans had to say on the quarterback front.
When you're evaluating quarterbacks, different quarterbacks can do a lot of different things. And I think the system is built around the quarterback as opposed to trying to fit a quarterback into a certain system. So it's all about the player that you have, not only a quarterback, but that's a receiver. Like, what does that guy do well? Linebackers, what do they do well? And you put guys in positions as coaches, you put guys in position to be successful. So it's not about a system per se, it's about just making sure that player has the right tools and you're putting him in a spot where he can thrive.
That is a very political answer. I mean, it's the answer you expect him to give, but it does sound like to me they are quietly confident in their quarterback evaluations. They have, I think, again, this is a vibes analysis. This is not reporting. It sounds to me like they know what they're going to do at the quarterback position, whether that be draft or address it in free agency. Almost certainly it's going to be drafting a guy, and who that guy is, they probably don't know just yet. They're probably still doing their due diligence and doing their homework on the guys. So that's kind of where they're at. And it sounds like DeMeco Ryans is not afraid. If anything, he's probably a little bit excited to begin developing a young guy. And he's exactly the kind of coach you would want, even as a defensive guy, as a head coach, as a leader of men, developing young players. To me, the way that he came off to me, and I'm curious if you agree, he seems like the kind of guy that you would trust to develop a young roster and trust that young roster to immediately buy in with him.
No, I agree. I think someone asked him about that, just like coming to the combine, in going back to kind of something with Rand. Like he was a player before being a defensive coordinator and now a head coach. He knows not just the coaching side of the ball, but he's been in these players' shoes, and he was a leader on that Houston Texans team when he did play, which I think is why they made the hire. And I think it's such a perfect fit. And he was so enthusiastic to talk about, kind of locating those key guys in the later rounds that he can find value and sees potential in. So I totally agree with you on that.
The other new head coach that we got to talk to and hear from was Shane Steichen, the former offensive coordinator for the Eagles, now newly installed as the head coach of our favorite ponies up north in the AFC South. The Colts head coach spoke about quarterbacks as well, naturally, because both of these teams in a very bad division, very high in the draft order, very much in the quarterback market. And this is the Colts, the team that has been retread city for, I don't know, it feels like as long as I'm alive at this point now. Obviously not, but it's been a good, Andrew Luck left, and it's been at least half.
7 years.
I got to say, it's been at least a half decade that they've been, like in fantasy football, just streaming quarterbacks.
Yep. And
so it's time for that to end. And old crazy Uncle Jim, we're in town with him, so I guess you got to whisper that because he could be listening. He could have all these apartments bugged. He is letting the cat out of the bag. Clearly, he's posting pictures riding bears on Twitter. His relationship with the Bears has always been very strong, according to him, whatever that means. He's going to draft a quarterback. We know this. He's an unhinged owner. He's crazy. He's not very wise, and he runs his mouth. And so it's nice for us because we can tell you with, I'll say with confidence, they're drafting a quarterback.
Yeah.
The question is which one. And Shane Steichen's no dummy. He knows that that's the position he's probably being put in. He was asked about quarterback development and where the Colts are with their quarterback situation. And here's what he had to say on the QB front.
Physical traits, yeah. Obviously you got to be able to throw it and cut it through the wind and all those things. But again, the accuracy is one of the biggest things. Like I think when it's 3rd and 8, you got to have it. Like you got to be able to stand in the pocket and deliver a strike with the guy coming down, barreling down your chest. I think that says a lot about a guy's toughness. I look for that on tape. Obviously the vetting process of it, but the physical traits, obviously guys come in different shapes and sizes. We've seen Hall of Famers that are 6 foot. We've seen Hall of Famers that are 6'5". Like, again, it's that it factor, right? Because everyone's going to have some talent. You got to find
so
and dig
6 foot's
deep.
not a deal breaker.
No, we've seen it done. Drew Brees is a great example.
The height isn't the deal breaker. No one is. If anyone is saying that Bryce Young's height is the problem, they're wrong. And I don't think they should be listened to all that much. It's not that he's short. Now, like, height matters. Don't get me wrong. For NFL quarterbacks, being able to see over the line is a significant advantage. There's a reason a lot of good quarterbacks are 6'2" and above. I mean, really, that's that body type. It's the outliers that are shorter than 6'2" for the most part, because I'm trying to think. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, the shorter elite quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers is 6'2", Patrick Mahomes is 6'2". That's kind of where all those guys are. And then the yellow zone is 6'1" or 6 foot. You get into the red if you got your height starting with a 5. But we've seen guys do it and do it well. We've seen Kyler Murray be able to play at that height. We've seen Drew Brees be able to play at that height. We've seen Russell Wilson be able to play at that height. Tua, I believe, is under 6 foot. He's shorter. If he is under 6 foot, I'll add him to the list. If not, strike that from the record. The point here is you can't be short and a twig. You have to be built like, I don't know, Russ and Drew and Kyler. You got to be a thicker guy. And that's not what Bryce Young is. He's going to show up here as Fat Bryce, and we'll see how much weight he managed to put on for really this event in particular. But it's not going to matter. His play weight is his play weight. I don't see this guy ever playing really at north of 200 pounds.
I totally. It's going to go into their evaluation, but I think in that comment that Shane Steichen made, I think the more interesting part is, and he said this, it wasn't just in that clip. He said it 3 or 4 times throughout his interview that he values accuracy in a quarterback above all else. And now he kind of took those words back, in which someone asked him, well, can you teach a quarterback accuracy? And he said yes. So he kind of said that we're looking for an accurate passer,
which I disagree with, by the way.
We're looking for an accurate passer. However, we can teach any of these guys accuracy, so we really don't know who we're going with yet.
Yeah, see, and that's clever. It's coach speak in reality, and that's a debate for another time because we could spend an hour on that alone. Can you teach accuracy? I would strongly argue, no, you cannot. You can tweak accuracy by teaching better footwork and mechanics, but you can't, at the end of the day, accuracy is a timing thing. It's a mechanics thing. It's a physics thing. And it's a mental thing. And if those things aren't working in unison, you can't program a person that doesn't have it to have it. It's just not the way that it works. Yeah. With that, we will be done with our show and tell video portion of the show and get to our last 2 segments here and then get out of here. But we do have some news to get into that I'll throw to you, JT, in just one moment. First, if you are not subscribed to the show, I'm going to say right now is the time to do that. If you're listening via podcast, go subscribe to the podcast. Who's listening to the podcast they're not subscribed to? That's weird. It's bad behavior. Subscribe to the podcast. And then scroll to the bottom of the feed. Leave us a 5-star rating. And then leave a review in the box. You can type any review that you'd like. And we're happy to read it out on the air as long as it's 5 stars. So please give us that feedback. We also appreciate you guys tuning in live again every single day for the next 5 more of these that we're doing after today. Every single day, 5 more days through Sunday, we will be live here in Indianapolis, covering everything that we saw, heard, did at the Combine. A lot more to come. Really, the interesting bits are still to come. So you'll want to make sure to follow us and tune in for those shows and then interact. We had a lot of interaction at the beginning of the show in the chat. Appreciate you guys helping us make sure we got the stream up and running. But if you have any questions, thoughts, comments along the way, please be sure to go over to Broadway Sports Media on YouTube, subscribe while you're there, and then leave comments in the chat watching live. We appreciate you very much. And tell a friend. It's helpful to the show's growth if you mention this to your friends and your family. All right, let's get to some Titans and NFL news with producer JT.
Yeah, let's start with the biggest story today, which is Jalen Carter. It was reported earlier today that there is an arrest warrant that has been issued for the Georgia defensive tackle and potential number 1 pick, Jalen Carter, for reckless driving and racing. It stemmed from the January 15th crash that took the life of a teammate in Stafford. Now, we were talking about this earlier. That was kind of something that's kind of seemingly kind of not went under the rug, but we didn't really talk about it at the time.
It wasn't a big national news story like it now is, because I guess I'm assuming because we didn't know really the involvement of Jalen Carter at the time. And
so this came from
Ari Marov,
amongst other people, but it came out most importantly at 10:10, right, this morning.
He was scheduled to talk.
Jalen Carter scheduled to talk at
10:30,
10:30.
right? Yeah, 20 minutes before you're supposed to go
20
up on the
minutes
podium.
before he's supposed to go out.
Great timing.
And
Suspect timing.
In the
actually.
Indiana Convention Center, it was kind of a buzz at that
was
point.
very much a
It was
buzz.
an interesting energy in the convention center. Later to find out that Jalen Carter is just nowhere to be seen. He did
when you saw that
yeah.
court order come
we
down,
knew
you
it wasn't going to come
immediately.
But
So he's not coming out.
He did not show up to his availability. It doesn't seem like he's going to be doing anything here at the combine this week. Really interesting to see.
He is not. He is headed. He released a statement that he is headed back to Athens to address this. He says to clear his name and to get the charges dropped or dismissed. So, that's his plan. But you go ahead. Sorry,
it'll be very interesting to see how his draft stock is affected, and I mean, in how where we go from here.
Yeah.
About this.
So these are my thoughts. It's horrible, obviously, and the reading that I've done on it seems pretty preliminary. It happened today. We don't yet know exactly what's going on or what happened. Clearly, the DA in Athens believes that the police department was misled by Carter at the time of the event. He is being accused of fleeing the scene. I guess when his teammate died, he's then. I'm asking this as a question. Am I understanding this right? He was fleeing the scene when his teammate died, and we're just now learning that he was behind the wheel. Why are we just now learning about those things? How did we not know that before? The other question is, was he inebriated in any way? Was he intoxicated? Was he drunk driving? Was he Am I incapacitated? Or was, more importantly, he incapacitated?
Move on.
Is it Porky Pig who goes,
Yeah.
and then chooses another word? Yeah. Was he drunk? Was he drunk driving? It sounds like something that he could go to jail for if this is not unfounded, the warrant put out for his arrest. And it's something that not only could ruin his NFL career, it could put him behind bars for a long time and ruin his life.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of information out right now. Of course, we have the information of the crash, and his teammate was behind the wheel going somewhere around 100 miles an hour.
They were speed racing.
The blood alcohol content of his friend is around the 0.197, which is
0.197.
Yes.
Are you sure?
Mm-hmm. That's what came out today, at least what I saw.
Almost 0.2?
Yeah, 0.197 right here. His
almost
blood alcohol concentration was 0.197.
And he was driving?
Mm-hmm.
How is he standing?
I don't know.
How is he breathing? That's really bad if that's what happened. And I would say to his credit, but I don't. I'll just read the statement. This is a statement from Georgia head coach Kirby Smart. He said, "The charges announced today are deeply concerning, especially as we are still struggling to cope with the devastating loss of two beloved members of our community." By the way, it was his teammate and a staff or a trainer or a coach that died in that accident. So it was all within the team. It went on, the statement, to say, "We will continue to cooperate fully with the authorities while supporting these families and assessing what we can learn from this horrible tragedy." That came from Kirby Smart about 4 or 5 hours ago. My response to that is, ain't no way he didn't know that. Ain't no way he did not know. I just think that he and all of these coaches don't really have any shame when it comes to this kind of thing. And it's another example of Georgia coaches maybe being a little bit misleading about their players. Titans fans know well and good the pain that can be instilled upon you when you are lied to about a player from Georgia coaches. The Isaiah Wilson situation a couple years ago, when the Titans staff, John Robinson and company, were duped into thinking that Isaiah Wilson was a loves ball guy when he was definitively not a loves ball guy. I don't believe Kirby Smart. I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't know about this, or at least know that it's a possibility. There were rumors. There was an investigation still ongoing. Don't say you didn't know when we know that you knew. That don't lie to our faces. So that's frustrating.
Moving on to some two Titan-specific things we have in the news today. It was reported that, let me pull it up here, defensive line coach Terrell Williams was named the team's assistant head coach per Mike Vrabel. Williams has been with the team as the D-line coach since 2018, so he gets a little bit of a promotion there. So good for him.
Yeah, my only comment or question on this is he going to start rivaling Stretch for Vrabel's favorite? Is he why he's the assistant head coach now? That's kind of what Stretch has done for years. He's in one of those. I don't even know what the official role for him is.
I don't know either.
But his role is just Vrabel's vibes guy. He runs the music at practice. He does anything and everything needed, and apparently is very, very involved in serious big boy game planning and the business of the sport. So I think that Stretch might need to watch out a little bit because Vrabel's got a new deputy in town.
Finally, the NFLPA today gave out their team report cards.
This I find fascinating.
This is really fascinating to me. So it goes through a bunch of categories on how well the team takes care of their players and whatnot. So let's take a look at the Titans grade. So let's start with treatment of families. They got a B minus grade, and that's ranked tied 16th out of 32 teams. I like how they rank. They rank them 1 through 32 as well.
I'll say this, by the way, just for clarification, and correct me if I'm wrong. These report cards are based on anonymous player surveys that the NFLPA has gotten back. They're not just making this up. This is from the players within the union of the NFLPA talking about the teams that they've played for. So it's not unfounded by any means. I'd say that this is probably an accurate reflection of what these team player circumstances look like. But I find at least one of these very interesting. Continue.
So next we have food service and nutrition, a B minus as well. The weight room, a B. The strength coaches, an A minus.
Pause. Hard pause. Titans fans, so either the players are lying or they're telling the truth, and you got to stop blaming the strength and conditioning coaches for the Titans' injury luck. We'll see if those same guys stay around and if the injury luck turns for the better, and suddenly this year's Titans team is among, I mean, I'm not even going to set a high bar. They're going to have to beat Jacksonville from last year.
They're going to be average.
Just be normal. Don't even be like, if they could have a year where not even average, but if they could just not be the outlier and not be like the whole league Titans injuries, that would be enough for me to say, okay, maybe it's not the training staff, maybe it's just two real.
But then it gets really interesting with the rest of this list here.
Right.
The Titans rated the training room itself a B minus,
sure,
and the training staff an A minus, which is very interesting.
It's okay, I guess. Training staff is not the issue for the injury concerns either, Titans fans.
And then locker room, they gave a C, so I guess.
That checks out.
And then the team travel is a F.
Is that 32 out of 32?
No, they're 28. They're tied 28.
I need them to elaborate. What does that mean? I have never in my life heard a Titans player complain about the travel accommodations. Maybe I'm not talking to the right people or asking the right questions. But as far as I'm aware, they fly private charter like the rest of the league. They stay in the appropriate hotels. They get charter buses to and from games. And then on the way back, when you win on Thursday Night Football, I guess, were serving a couple road sodas that you got somebody that will go unnamed in a little bit of trouble. So it sounds like, if anything, they're treating their guys a little too well when it comes to travel. How'd they get an F grade for travel?
I have no idea.
I'm gonna by the end of the week, I need you to figure that
out. Okay.
You ask.
I'll ask around here.
Find all those former players that are hanging out here and ask them. Woo. All right. Is that it for our Titans news?
That is it for the Titans news.
All right. While I'm dropping things, I guess I'm giving myself a cue here for us to wrap up. Briefly, I have a video to show you. This takes 10 seconds of your time, but it's a little thing we shot earlier today, just outside the south gate at Lucas Oil Stadium. And it is a preview of what will be brought to you at some point tomorrow. We're going to film it tomorrow. It will be out, and it should be a little bit of fun. Here's the preview. All right, we're here at the NFL fan experience outside of Lucas Oil Stadium at the Combine in Indianapolis. Tomorrow morning, JT and I, are going to be allowed special media access in here. We're going to try out some of the different drills and routines that the prospects are being put through this week, get a more average person baseline. Should make for some interesting content. See just how well I perform here in the 40-yard dash. We've got a bench press, a high jump that a short guy like me is going to be really funny to watch do. So make sure to check out our video on the average person going through the NFL Combine fan experience tomorrow on the Hot Read podcast. Yeah, so we asked the NFL guys, but the guys putting on the fan experience, hey, we saw that it opens at 1 each day. Could we show up beforehand, since we're credentialed media, and do a tour of the place, try out the different stuff, make a video on it? And they said, yeah, sure. So we've got an NFL rep that will meet tomorrow that's going to accompany us and help us with, I guess, operating the different drills, figuring out what's going on, showing us around. We're going to do a video on that. I'm going to wear some athletic-ish clothing, and I think you will as well.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be a little bit more casual day for us, for sure.
Well, to start, and then we're gonna get cleaned up and go cover all the cornerbacks and start the actual drills coverage tomorrow evening. But that won't be the show tomorrow, by the way. That will be a separate thing. We'll probably play some clips of it on the show because it'll be very funny. But keep a look out for that. And I think it'll be interesting as well as funny because there is a lot of really cool stuff in there. We went in there today. They were almost done setting stuff up. And from what I could tell, it's a really cool situation. So if you're near or within the Indianapolis area, you should come on through because it is free, I believe. And there's a lot of really cool stuff. It's right by the Combine, the field house, the giant Kroger that is Lucas Oil Stadium. So you get to see the giant Kroger up close and personal. We got to see it today for the first time. It sure is big and Krogery.
Yeah, I almost went in there looking for groceries.
Sure, yeah, it makes you hungry just looking at it. So that's what tomorrow will bring. What else is on tomorrow's schedule among the players that we have to talk to, JT? We're missing out in order to go to the NFL experience situation in the morning with the NFL rep that we got to meet us there. We're missing out on the punters and the place kickers and the one long snapper that was brought in for the combine. There's one long snapper here, and that guy's a king. And dare I say, it's early. I've not seen him test. I think he's the best long snapper at the combine.
He might be.
No, I think that he is definitively.
That's a hot take.
I think he's got the rest of the. I think he's got the field lapped. So we're gonna miss out on those guys in the morning. If there's anything worth talking about, we'll hear about it later and still cover it. I promise. What we will be back in time to cover is all these cornerbacks, and in the afternoon slot, we've got quite a few of them. It's actually going to start with some safeties that we may or may not get back in time for. Jordan Battle, Antonio Johnson, J.L. Skinner III, among some of the top names there that we'll get to speak with. I'm just trying to scan to make sure. Jamie Robinson out of Florida State is another big one, and Christopher Smith II out of Georgia. Those are the big names that I see in the morning sessions. And then tomorrow at the 10 o'clock hour, we start the we start with all the guys. Joey Porter Jr. There it is. Yeah, it's
Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez.
So it's the cornerback gauntlet right here. It's cornerback palooza. We're going to
be busy from 11 to 12.
11 to 12, all within 1 hour. We get to speak to Christian Gonzalez, Clark Phillips out of Utah, Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. He's one I'm really interested in there at the beginning of the second round. He's the kind of guy, and there's a number of them. We'll talk about this at depth tomorrow. The number of guys in this draft that in a normal draft would be first round graded cornerbacks, but will end up going into the second, maybe even the third. It's a lot of value to be had. A lot of value. So day 2, day 3 cornerback, absolutely on the table for any team, Titans in particular. Some other guys we'll get to see. Joey Porter Jr., I know you are big on him. We'll pay attention to him. If the Titans were to go away from offense with the first pick, you could always see, I mean, we don't know Rand Carthen, right? If he's a best player available guy, Joey Porter Jr. could absolutely be the best player available there at 11. Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami is a guy we've talked about on the show a little bit with James Foster a couple weeks ago. I'm going to get to talk to him. I'm very excited about that one. I think that he's a really great player. Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois also could be there in the first round. Juju Brents out of Kansas State could be a third-round guy. Who else? Keely Ringo, my crush of this cornerback group that I'm crushing on him purely because I don't think he's my favorite, but I think everybody's a little bit too down on him. We get to talk to him, Cam Brown and Cam Smith.
who's the other guy from South Carolina as well?
From SC, you have
His last name's
Darius
Rush.
Rush. Darius Rush we'll talk to
I was gonna
tomorrow.
say Cooper Rush.
Very different players, both elite, obviously. Tay Banks out of Maryland, another one I'm very interested to talk to, could be a early day 2 guy. So yeah, there's a lot of them, more than we've even named, but that's the rundown of tomorrow's activities. And then do you happen to know off the top of your head tomorrow's afternoon, evening combine activities are
I
what?
believe it begins at 2 and goes to 6. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing tomorrow though.
If you wouldn't look that up,
Yeah.
or if you wouldn't mind looking that up while I get us out of here. While JT's looking that up, and don't leave just yet because you're going to want to know. We, again, just to advertise the show, are going to be live every single day while we're here in Indianapolis. We are loving every second and loving bringing you all of this coverage. Make sure that you're tuning in on Twitter, following us there, on YouTube. We got videos coming out starting today, really multiple on a daily basis. So make sure to keep an eye on that. We've got many more in-person interviews planned while we're here with, I think, some folks you're going to really want to hear from, some folks we've never had on the show, some folks that we've never met until this week. So we'll be doing that, probably getting some on-the-scene interviews in the next day or two with some media members that you probably know and love. We'll step aside in the convention center or on Radio Row and get to chat with them. A lot of exciting stuff coming up. So until then, we have an answer on that, or we're just gonna
we'll leave them.
We're gonna leave them hanging because they can't find it, but we're gonna find it. They may have just sent us an email about it, but
Probably
tomorrow there are real combine activities going on, activities. So you'll want to check those out tomorrow evening, afternoon. Not sure if we'll get to those before the show. May end up covering those on what is tomorrow, Thursday?
Yeah,
on Friday's show. But nonetheless, we'll talk about it all. Until then, until tomorrow, I've been your host, Easton Freeze, for producer JT. This has been the Hot Read Podcast, and we will talk to you on Thursday.